Kyle Field and I were planning to talk a little bit about AI today. We were actually having a chat. I don't know how it started, some tweets from Elon or something, and then got to the point where we thought, oh my gosh, what would a conversation between Lex Fridman, George Hotz, GeoHot, and Elon Musk look like? Because I mean, just a conversation between two of them is fascinating and in some ways hilarious, but definitely fascinating and intriguing. And the three of them would be just a crazy chemistry that would be like, it's hard to imagine, but I feel like it would be almost out of this world. It would be something really amazing to watch. So Kyle, any initial thoughts on this before we sort of, I don't know, we could role play, we could pretend like we are Elon or Lex and George a little bit, or just think about what they would debate or get into.
I think what's fascinating for me was just thinking about what that overlapping of minds would look like. I mean, I think George Hotz and Elon have kind of butted heads, but in my mind, they're so similar. And that's why they butt heads in a lot of ways, because they're both revolutionary thinkers. They both have just an amazing command over, I think, in this world, in this context, software and vehicles. I mean, George Hotz has been hacking devices and software solutions since the original iPhone, I think. I mean, he was 17. He spent a summer hacking the iPhone, and it just kind of went from there into the PlayStation. I mean, there were a bunch of other ones in between, but the PlayStation made news, and he got sued by Sony, and then he moved into kind of the AI world and machine learning and Tesla. Not that it all kind of flowed linearly like that, but it's been exciting just seeing him tear into different subjects, and he just has such a great command over software. So it would be, I think it'd be amazing to see him kind of the melding of the minds.
Yeah, he said in his interview with Lex Fridman, because he was on Lex Fridman about a year ago, Lex Fridman's MIT AI podcast, and he said that his initial hack of the iPhone was a hardware hack, not software, which Lex, it sort of surprised Lex, but he was like, yeah, that's how, and he didn't know software at all. And then he went through different jobs and he learned software, but and worked for OpenAI for a bit. But it's funny because his like in their conversation, his approach to software is like completely different, polar opposite of Lex Fridman's. Like Lex Fridman is very methodological. It's like, you follow this process, you go in order, you go linear, everything is straight. George has, I mean, Lex was like laughing in their conversation because George just throws everything on the wall and it's like, what works? And it's like, what works? And he can't follow. I mean, I'm sure he can, but he sort of explained in that interview, like, he can't just go through like Lex Fridman way. He has to throw everything out the wall and just see what works. And then doing that rapidly changing, basically iteration testing, he figures things out. That's why. And so Lex, could appreciate that because completely the opposite of how he works, and could see how that works, and also creates downsides, which George is very open about. And Elon's funny because he seems like he's sort of a mixture of that, because he likes to build on a foundation, like go up, but at the same time he's like constantly like throwing stuff. You can see it when you can even hear it like when he's on a conference call or something. So he has a kind of a mixture approach, and it'd be interesting to see where that conversation went with them. Like, and George talked about his I don't really understand. You can maybe add if you know something about how they butted heads, because on that interview he mentioned like Elon basically gave him a deal of like, if you can reproduce what Mobileye was doing, this was back when they just broke off the Mobileye, was doing in a month, you get like $10 million or something like that. And every month
like 12 million.
And then every month that extra it takes, you lose $1 million. So if it takes you 10 months, then you get 2 million, I guess. And it sounded sort of like he did it, but at the same time, I'm not really clear. Maybe he did it, but he didn't do it according to Tesla's expectation. I don't know. You can add but the funny thing in there was like he talked about his interview with Elon too. It's for and he had that same approach of like just throw stuff out there, and he realized like afterwards like, man, I said something really stupid, it doesn't make any sense, but it's just like his kind of approach of like just yeah. But do you have any more perspective on their history, their relationship?
Well, I mean, I think that's the hacker approach. I mean, George Hotz, like everything he's done, at least in the public sphere, that really made news was basically hacking. I mean, the iPhone hack all the way back then, it started with hardware because that was the easiest vulnerability that he found. And I think a week or two later, he moved it into a software-only hack where he didn't have to tear the phone apart, which is good. But ultimately, hacking is really that. It's like you're just throwing as many different I guess, approaches to the solution or to the problem. You're trying to crack into something or find a vulnerability. And so you're really just throwing as many things onto the wall, like you said, as you can. And so, I mean, the approach makes complete sense. I think when you're building a solution from the ground up, it is a little different in terms of the objective. And I think Elon's approach in terms of building that solid foundation, very first principles focused, saying here are the things we know have to be true and building only on those fundamental truths on up, is probably a way to achieve a better objective in this type of problem. But yeah, I thought the deal was fascinating. I mean, it's one of those things where George could have spent 11 months working on it and made far less money than if you would have been able to solve it in a month. But I mean, it's not something that you can necessarily even predict. As we've seen with Elon, you can't really predict how long it's going to take to solve full autonomy.
Have you seen details on that deal before? Because I don't remember ever seeing the details on that until I saw that interview.
I don't remember where it came out. I saw it in a George Hotz interview somewhere recently, like maybe in the last 2 weeks. I don't know if it was a new interview or an older one, but I did think that was fascinating. I think I don't know why the relationship fell apart. I think it was something to do with the contract, is what I remember, but I don't have the details on that. I think for me,
sorry,
what was that?
Go ahead.
Oh, I was saying, I think what was exciting when you and I were talking about the three of these guys getting together is that they do all have such different but extreme approaches. Like Lex is very structured and very just analytical and intentional with his interview questions and his thoughts, and you can just see he's got such a process-oriented mind. George is like a flurry, being in the middle of a hurricane, trying to grab things as they're flying by, and Elon has his approach as well. And I think it would just be fascinating to see him talk through it. But for me, I aspire to some sort of reconciliation. Like I love the idea of the three of them kind of working together to build this next generation solution and saying, we can all make this beneficial for all of us. Let's try to solve it iteratively, maybe just a weekly call or something. But I think it'd be fascinating to hear him and see him talk and to see where that would go organically.
Not knowing the details, I just sort of had the hunch there's probably some kind of disagreement on what the contract was or what the deliverables were. I don't know, but it seems like they both have seems like they have a mutual. They definitely don't seem to sour. I mean, George thinks very highly of Elon, and Elon seems to really respect George still and all that. So of course, I think he made like a bit of a joke once, but it's George's obviously he's a very unique person, so it's it's easy to kind of be like use him as a kind of caricature sometimes. But I thought his interview with Lex was probably more interesting to me than the one. Oh, I got a waste management truck. Than the one with Elon, because one, they were just so completely opposite, Lex and George. So it was like hilarious to sort of watch, like oil and water, and they seemed to both appreciate the conversation. For sort of it pulled them both a little bit further in than they normally go in certain directions. And then the Elon stuff was great too, but he's also like said these things many times mostly, and I thought I learned more. There were more details between George and Lex that just like were new to me, versus Elon's very good, sort of high level communication of the topics, which he just is used to doing at a certain level, I think, for people who don't understand. And then, you could get into details with Lex, but I think he kept it more at a layman's level for communicating. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. It was late at night, and we were like, it would be so funny to hear them having a conversation. It would just be like, so we're like, oh, we should record talking about them having a conversation, because I mean, George would just be like all over the place, and you could see like Lex over there trying to process it, and trying to be like, okay, wait, what did George just say? What? And Elon something, man, what do you think about, like off in space with some kind of like building on what George's thoughts or something? It would be just it would be one of the best conversations I could imagine recording and trying to witness and and analyze, because I don't know where it would go, but it would just, you could see them sort of building on each other's energy and thoughts in their own funny way.
Totally. No, I think I'm really curious to hear what Lex and George would think about Tesla moving into the hardware space. I mean, I see that as a major competitive advantage for Tesla, and the fact that they feel like they need to develop their own hardware solution for AI and full self-driving processing is insane to me. And I think, I mean, obviously they're on hardware 3 now. We're kind of getting whispers of hardware 4 being either in development or pretty far along in actual development. And I think I'd be curious to see what that unpacking would look like. Because I mean, even to get the hardware built and laid out is a massive undertaking. But I mean, that's something that Comma AI, like George's company, just can't do at their current scale. But Tesla, I mean, they're just throwing everything and the dog at this problem. And I mean, it's staggering.
So it made it, this might have been triggered by that. George was responding to the idea of the Tesla Dojo and was just really excited about it, and decided, sort of excited about the possibility of Tesla opening it up, having sort of an open platform. He's speaking to open platforms. Elon's speaking to open platforms. You could see that happening, but probably not. But in this case, but I think he was very hopeful about just the slim possibility of it. But you saw it, like, everyone got excited about this, been excited about it for a while, and then Elon's response, like, it's 0.1% done or something, and everyone's like,
yeah,
oh, like, oh, we thought you had this. So it's like kind of funny, like Elon gets excited about it, talks about it. It's way like years before it's done. I mean, he says this, maybe in a year, or, I think we could count on a couple of years, but it is a hardware. Yeah, I mean, the hardware thing is a little easier to predict. The software stuff, you never know what's going to happen, I think. But yeah, it would be wild to see them. The conversations that are on record there, like the one with George is a year old, and we published about it recently. And there was a lot of skepticism from them about the Tesla full self-driving. And this is at a time when Elon was still like, oh, we're going to be feature complete at the end of this year, 2019. And, they were both like, this is far, far, far away from robotaxi level. But Tesla will be first. They're like way ahead of everyone. Like George was like, yeah, I don't know when it's going to happen, but when it does, we'll be about 2 years behind Tesla. So it's kind of like, that was his like Tesla's going to be first and we're going to be second, like 2 years behind them. And everyone else is like in a different world going into a dead end. It was basically his perspective. So I'm curious to see how that's evolved now that Tesla, we should just get George on. I think George would do a podcast or a video. But I'm curious how they, and Lex also was like, felt strongly like Tesla shouldn't even talk about full self-driving or robot taxis. They should just focus on the lane keeping advantage that they have. That just creates a much better driving experience. And from a present day perspective, I mean, it's a big advantage. So I'm curious how their perspectives change on this with the hardware plan update and the software rewrite, which would be like, it would be over our head to hear George and Lex talk about the software rewrite, but like, do they think it's the solution? Do they, do they think, hey, this is all that was really needed and they're going to have robo-taxis when this is done? Are they as, enthusiastic and optimistic as Elon, or are they still like, we'll see what happens? That would be fast. That's what everybody wants to know, but nobody's at a level to evaluate. And these guys, potentially could from an independent outside Tesla perspective, which would be,
right.
Yeah, we should just email them and find out.
We'll make that happen. No, I think you brought up a bunch of good points. I mean, if you rewind the conversation to a year ago, we were talking hardware 3 and the software rewrite for hardware 3. So they're rewriting the full self-driving solution stack from the ground up again for the third time, I think, fourth time maybe. And that was a massive undertaking. We're like, okay, as soon as they get this, it'll be breakthrough. They were almost as good as the previous hardware solution and software solution, which again, they've been there before. I mean, Autopilot 1 hardware was, in many people's eyes, still one of the better solutions that they've ever deployed from a hardware and software standpoint. And so hardware 3, they were saying, yeah, we're going to get there again. And then you fast forward to today, we've still got hardware 3. They're starting to, I think they finished the hardware 3 rollout. So they've upgraded all of the cars for the people that have paid for the full self-driving solution, and all new cars are coming with that. And they're still obviously working on that solution from a software standpoint. But now we've got hardware 3 on the horizon. You mentioned Dojo. That's the full bottom-up training environment for full self-driving, which
a full supercomputer. Like when I tried to figure out what he was talking about, I found out it's like a supercomputer that nobody's built, that a few countries and Intel and different major companies, Google, are racing to be first with. And Elon's like, yeah, we're going to build a real supercomputer. Probably, I mean, basically entering the race without saying that. And I mean, I don't know if he considers it entering the race. They're just doing it for but it's interesting because it's done for a specific purpose, whereas the others are not. So then you have potentially the first or one of the first true supercomputer. What are they called? This is like
supercomputer. Yeah, I mean, it's not the first, and we've had Craze for a long time, and other.
I mean, exaflop, like the first
right,
exaflop.
The processing power.
So the first, one reaching that level supercomputer, that kind of processing power, and you have potentially the only thing of that capacity, and definitely the only one fully focused on full self-driving neural nets. So I mean, the question is still if it works. I mean, that's what I think even Elon sort of was like, we still don't really know if it works, but it should work.
Right. So yeah, they've been working on Dojo for ages, and it sounds like they're again starting bottom up and saying we need to we need a new hardware stack, and they're obviously in the very, very, very early stages of even building that. I mean, I think the hardware side could come along faster if they do just purchase kind of an off-the-shelf compute platform and then build their own software stack on top of that. But I mean, again, like we're resetting the clock in a lot of ways from a trading perspective, and saying, okay, well, we thought hardware 3 was going to be it. Now we're looking at hardware 4. We thought we had a good enough training environment and approach on the neural net training side to make this happen 2019. Now we're looking at 2020 feature complete. But I mean, obviously this feels like it resets the clock again. And it's that march of the nines, right? I mean, it's good enough, but it can be better. And I think they're continuing to find out like where that diminishing value kind of tails off, because the more you can improve the system, the safer it gets, the more lives you save. And it's hard to accept that any lives will be lost if you can make it better. So it'll be interesting to see how they eventually have to put the cap on that and say, we need to deliver something that's actually finished instead of leaving it in perpetual beta.
And that is one big advantage Elon has, is he wants to get stuff as soon as it's clearly better, rather than waiting for it to be perfect. And other companies and leaders sort of have had a more conservative approach. But it is, I kept thinking of your article from 2016 when Tesla announced that every new Tesla it's got this word gauntlet in the title. Tesla throws down a gauntlet or something. I've had to look it up so many times because I wanted to reference it so many times. But it was like basically when Tesla said that every new Tesla would have the hardware for full self-driving, which might have sort of been correct, but basically they ended up having to upgrade all that hardware for their plans. My car from last year, a year ago exactly, was one of the sort of not long after they started really putting hardware 3 in all the new cars. But yeah, then you have on their side, like not the car side, their side, they have the Dojo they're building, which is another generation part. But they're also like I thought for a long time, and I think a lot of people thought for a long time, that the cars were learning more than they were, like that there was more of this machine learning already going on. not so much like required by people to label and teach. And that was something also in the interview a year ago between, I think, Lex and George, or yeah, I think it was that one, where I think Lex mentioned there that or maybe in one with Cruz, even earlier, Cruz guy, Kyle something, that Tesla wasn't really doing as much as people thought, like with learning. Like I think he recognized a long time ago that people thought Teslas were learning were a lot smarter and more AI integrated than they were. So again, it's like nobody knows, but it's sort of communication around it is so sensitive because nobody knows that like one phrase can be, for people outside can seem like something different than it is. But yeah, it would be, I mean, yeah. So, well, one last thing. So, and then we'll cut this one off. But I'm also curious because, Tesla's got this approach. George is sort of following it. Nvidia is looking to do the hardware and software with major automakers, be like their Tesla arm for that stuff. And we don't know yet who's going to bite. I mean, Mercedes is doing it with them. We don't really know who else is going to really do the full, like let Nvidia do the hardware and software and just be out of it. But potentially, if Nvidia did this with 7 automakers and also built something like a Dojo, they could have a very big fleet size. They wouldn't have all the other stuff to worry about. They just have to focus on the hardware and software of autonomous driving. And you could see them doing well with that. I've seen our Kanan boss, who's a tech expert on our team, has been a little more skeptical about Nvidia. Like he thinks Nvidia is further behind than probably I assume. That they're just sort of they do hardware and they're just sort of getting their heads around the software of it. So they have a ways to go. Plus they need the miles logged, and they don't have that for a while still. But there's a question of their approach, which may mix other tech in more too, different tech, and Waymo's approach, which is, they use machine learning to some extent, but they rely on lidar to really have driverless vehicles on the road right now. And I mean, there's a question of, yeah, they're limited because they're geofenced. That's not, they have some quirks with the lidar, but theoretically, they're doing it in Phoenix area. They could, geofence 20 major metro areas and roll out robotaxis, and they'd be operating. And so then it's like, okay, you don't have to be able to drive across the country. You just have to be able to do all these trips that people do every day. And you've got, practically speaking, functionally speaking, what you need. I mean, a question of cost, but I just also see, and they're starting to partner with automakers more and more as well. Volvo, I think Nissan. I don't know. What do you think about those sort of 3 different major players? And yeah, what do you think? Oh, I lost your audio, I think. Are you muted? Oh, I hear you now. I got you. I heard
How about now? No?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You can hear me on the main one. Yeah, I think we're seeing a major split in the strategy. I mean, Elon very early on had a clear vision of what he wanted for full self-driving, and he wanted it to be capable anywhere. And I think Andrej Karpathy, who's leading Tesla's AI program for full self-driving, has been very clear on that in a couple of the talks he's given and the insights he's given into the program. Basically, they wanted to be able to function anywhere under any condition and basically identify a drivable path. And kind of mesh that up with the navigation and input from the driver if necessary in the meantime. And then ongoing, I mean, the car will be basically its own fully autonomous unit wherever it goes without those limitations. But I think to your point, the ability to geofence an entire metro area, or, I mean, for freight, like Waymo is moving into freight now, being able to geofence an entire highway system and to make it the system fully capable of fully autonomous driving on an entire highway network for a semi-truck
operator, I mean, that's a game changer. You don't need it to operate everywhere. You can have a driver do that last mile, but if you could just get it from, call it major depot to major depot, so goods arrive in Los Angeles, you have a manual operation to put goods on the boat and to get that vehicle onto the freeway, and then it transitions and it's autonomous. It could do 95% of the driving, which is obviously 90% of the driver cost, 95% of the driver cost, fully autonomously. And so I think there's a massive upside, both in robotaxis, like with Waymo in the cities, like you mentioned, and then also with fleets. I mean, it's almost a bigger opportunity because fleets spend so much, that's their business, heavy trucking. But moving goods around, I think there's a major opportunity for companies to move into that space, even with geofencing. And that's a huge win by itself.
I don't remember even seeing that, but it seems very vital, especially, you're going from you could be going from two not very populated areas, one to another. You could just geofence the whole thing probably much more easily than like where Waymo's operating in Phoenix, and just do it, and drop the driver. I mean, as long as it's, so it's and there's nothing really wrong with a fence, right? Fence is fine. It serves a purpose. As long as you can do your job within the fence, that's all that matters. So I'm very curious, and I mean, so much just comes from scaling up. So, if they get enough partnerships, theoretically, Nvidia and Waymo could scale up enough that costs come down, that their approaches are, not as expensive as people sort of often dwell on. But well, this is interesting. I thought we were gonna role play Elon and George Hotz. I thought we were gonna, because we did this late at night when we were goofy, so we were thinking to have it just fun, like pretend to be George Hotz, Lex Fridman, and Elon having a conversation. But I got to run, and really, there's a lot to think about the process. So thanks a lot. One of us will write this up. Maybe you want to write about it.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it comes out. Good stuff, though. It's always fun talking through it.
Cheers.
Awesome, man. Later.